So it's official. Donald Trump will be going to his grave as an adjudicated rapist, thanks to the United States Supreme Court, who, for the second time, told Donald Trump, we will not be intervening in your civil liability, E. Jean Carroll. So go ahead and pay that woman and get out of our faces. Now, this is a second personal lawsuit that is vexing Donald Trump and his kids. That's right, his children, Ivanka, Donald Jr., and Barron Trump, along with Ivanka's husband, Jared Kushner, are subject to subpoena for lawsuits and legal matters involving Donald Trump personally and their personal involvement. Yeah. So I'm going to go through the children's cases in a few minutes. Before that, I'm going to tell you what the E. Jean Carroll SCOTUS denial of intervention means, what it signals for this man for after his administration, if he lasts that long. And it's good news for us people who want to see accountability. So if you're watching this on YouTube, my case for that and my summation of what happened with the subpoenas of his kids continues after this intro. If you're not watching this on YouTube, you want to head on over there if you're interested in my take on these matters. Each one teach one is my motto. Share this video so more people know. Accountability is coming. The gears of justice grind slowly, but it's getting there. All right. So let's keep going, or see you on the YouTube channel if you're not there right now. All right. For those of you who are on the YouTube channel, let's go on. But before I get into this, the fact that the Supreme Court told Donald Trump they're not intervening, what this means is, as I've said, if you watch my account, that's the first time seeing me, I often state that the United States Supreme Court has historically, not just in the E. Jean Carroll case, but also remember in his New York hush money case, Donald Trump last year, January 2025, the United States Supreme Court, he asked to intervene in his sentencing in that state matter regarding something he did personally before he became president. The Supreme Court did not intervene. They may do a lot of things, bend over backwards regarding policy, but note they're all usually linked to Donald Trump's presidential power, or it's dealing with politics and the role as president. The E. Jean Carroll matter, the New York hush money case, all of those were matters that came before he was president, and matters that are distinctly not president related. So that woman paying off porn stars has nothing to do with the president's job or your job or anybody's job as president. That has something to do with your personal thing, your personal tackle that woman, your personal payoff of those women for things you did personally to prepare yourself and put you personally in a better light, to hide that personal information from the United States public before you became president. So what that says is when Caroline Leavitt in 2025 was asked to give the name of the people who went to Donald Trump's crypto dinner wearing masks, who were the people under the mask, and Caroline Leavitt says that is Donald Trump's personal time. We don't have to disclose what he does in his personal time. So during that meeting, if there were exchanges or the initial plans, which we're going to find out when the Democrats regain the House and Senate and regain subpoena authority, and the chairmanships are able to bring the people in front of them to testify or claim the fifth and don't testify, or refuse to answer a subpoena and get thrown in jail, or not answer and risk jail time. When we get to that stage, we're going to find out the extent to which that dinner include the precursors or the origins of what may or may not look like bribery, which you're not entitled to bribe, you're not entitled to take. Even Todd Blanche, during oversight hearing meeting, when pressed upon, said if a president exchanged a pardon for money, that president should be impeached. Todd Blanche said that. So it's all established. Even with Donald Trump's criminal attorney turned AG, you can't take bribes. So what happened at the crypto dinner, if it was precursor to bribes, it's not. So that tells you that a lot of the things this man has done, a lot of the grifting, a lot of the backdoor shenanigans, when we discover them, they should not be covered by the Supreme Court. He should not be protected. Now, if he's no longer here, those lawsuits, those cases by the United States government, by people who are defrauded, against the people who are participating should still go against his estate. So his estate carries that because that's civil and that has to do with him criminally. And also remember, the Supreme Court protected him from criminal liability. The fact that his name is on all of these civil documents, know that he's not protected civilly. They just gave him qualified or immunity from going to jail to be criminally. But as to civilly, all these things he's doing that look like to be corruption, when they're investigating, we find out for him, not only is it going to impact him if he's around and his family members, but his entire state, all his trust, his entire thing. We're coming after that stuff. He's not getting away with it. That is the takeaway from this, what happened today. So now let's get into his family members and what happened with them. The BBC. Now, what I'm going to do is for you is play a summation of the case that appeared on the, I think it's Great Britain Network, GBN Network, which is like their version of Fox. It's a right-wing conservative. So when you hear the way they summarize it, the way they refer to it, is going to be like favorable towards Donald Trump. But I still couldn't find a news outlet that actually gave a summation. So I don't have to do this of what's going on. So I'm going to play the intro for you really quick. Let's listen.
Daily Telegraph tonight. The BBC intentionally defamed President Donald J. Trump, and now the BBC is seeking to harass him, his family and supporters by abusing the deposition process. The BBC is simply trying to distract away from their own obvious liability. Well, it comes, of course, that in November, the Telegraph revealed that separate parts of Mr. Trump's speech on that fateful day, on January the 6th, have been spliced together for the Panorama documentary, making it appear as though he encouraged his supporters to storm the Capitol building after he lost the election. In fact, he said he wanted supporters to demonstrate peacefully. Let's get a word from my American panel here, first of all. Mark Albert, Greg Swenson. Good evening, chaps. This is breaking in the past couple of moments. We heard yesterday how the BBC was trying to subpoena Donald Trump Jr., Ivanka Trump and her husband, Jared Kushner, by literally going to their home in Florida and trying to whack them with court papers.
Right.
The Secret Service was saying, no chance, off you go, you're not having these papers anywhere near them. Now, Trump today, Greg, has said, you're harassing my family.
Yeah, I think it's backfired on the BBC. I mean, of course, people use the discovery process to try to find some, information that might embarrass the plaintiff and maybe dial it down a bit. But they've already admitted that they were wrong. They admitted that they did committed the crime, so to speak, if you want to call it.
They deny they defamed him.
Right.
They said, how can we defame you when you went to and won the election?
Yeah, so they're arguing that there shouldn't be great liability.
So when he says the crime, it's not a crime. This is a civil matter. So there's no crime. And this is Greg. The host says they admitted they defamed him. They did not admit they defamed him. They admitted that they spliced the information, and they say we apologize. But there are other elements of defamation that goes beyond just saying, okay, yes, just what you accused me of. I agree, I did what you accused me of, but that doesn't equal defamation because there's more before you get to that defamation stage. So I don't think this guy is a lawyer, this great guy who's a commentator. The host, like I said, is the right-wing version, the Fox version of. So you can see the biases on there. But listen to Mark Albert, who is a journalist, respond
with the networks. And so I think it's a big mistake by the BBC.
Yeah, I think if they had settled, it would have been something like $5 to $10 million potentially. But Mark, is it harassing, forget who it is, the president or Joe Bloggs, is it harassment when you just try and serve court papers?
So I actually covered the justice system for many, many years when I was a journalist, and discovery is going to open the closets and the skeletons, and they're going to be wide-ranging discovery. It doesn't surprise me in the least that these subpoenas were attempted to be served. I don't think they were successful in any of the subpoenas, right? Because in New York at Trump Tower, they wouldn't accept them either, I think the article said. Not a surprise that they're trying to do it. And when you're a plaintiff and you sue for defamation, you have to expect that there's going to be discovery, especially if there's not a settlement.
So what happens legally?
This case is still being adjudicated. So when the host and the guest says that they agreed that they admitted that they defamed him, and they did not. They admitted that they did the splicing. They said the splicing was wrong. We apologize for that. But that still doesn't mean there's defamation, because there's other elements of defamation. And that's why they're asking for the discovery. If you follow me, one of the things I do besides share with you the wins against the Trump administration and litigations, I also do courses. I do classes. I do live Q&As on Wednesdays at 1. And one of my live Q&As that I did recently, and if you remember my paid community, you can go see it on the archives. It should be up there in the archives. That's what I need to do. I talked about discovery, and discovery is when you narrow the focus. But the thing about discovery is each side has to exchange documents. You get to ask questions, whether written form or whether deposition oral form, to just make sure we're on the same page, because they're making a set of allegations. If I'm going to defend them, I need to know what these allegations are. I need to see the text messages. I need to see the exchanges. And that's what BBC is asking for, because in a nutshell, Donald Trump is saying, I did not encourage them to do this. But we all know from reporting that Ivanka Trump infamously told her dad to go in front of the cameras and denounce it and tell the people to stand down. So if he refused, if their text messages or exchanges shows that he refused, then if their reporting is that he purposely or intentionally wanted them to go there, and there's evidence to show that, then they can defend themselves. They can't defend themselves unless they see the text messages or get to ask questions of Ivanka. And that is what Mark Albert just reminded the panel. Like, you open this up. You can't demand $10 billion and just announce that leave my family out of this, leave my communications out of this. That's not how it works. If you don't want to deal with that sort of stuff, then don't sue. They're not harassing the Ivanka. They noticed they picked Ivanka, Don Jr., and Jared. Why? Because those three were there. They didn't ask Eric. They didn't ask Lara Trump. They didn't ask Melania. They asked the people who were there. So it's not harassing the family, And here you should also note that the case initially said they damaged his financials. So the BBC said, oh, you say we damaged your financials. Okay, let's see the financials before he made the statement. Let's see the financials afterwards so we can defend ourselves. He didn't want to give us financials. So what he did was ask the lawyer. Sorry, he asked the judge to allow him to amend the lawsuit. So that's what they've done, amend the lawsuit, because they don't want the information out there. Again, it's an anomaly to mention those two news outlets that's catered, and a few others did, because the majority of them, when they actually push back, they win. The AP has won, the CNN has won multiple times. New York Times have won multiple times. They try to subpoena the New York Times journalists who covered either the leak regarding the Air Force One Qatari jet switch or the Situation Room. There's so many scandals. And they end up having to revoke those because, again, if you push back, they fight. Because you push back, you fight, why would you settle? But so the Greg says they should settle, but Mark was like, no, listen to Mark.
Going to settle. I'd be really surprised.
You think they'll go for it?
I'd be really surprised if they settle.
Well, what they'll do if they do that, if they go the full hog and they go to Miami in 2027 February, they'll be using, I suspect, either insurance money.
So he's talking about the BBC where they're getting the funding to defend this lawsuit. The case, by the way, is scheduled to go to trial in February. I don't think it's going to go that far. I think at some point when it's looking like the judge is going to compel Jared Kushner and Ivanka and Don Jr. to testify, and they'll be in a situation where they have to plead the fifth to protect their dad. And Donald Trump's already said before, if you don't know, go look it up. He said, whoever pleads the fifth means you're guilty. He said that out of his own mouth. So it's going to look really bad for his kids to be like, plead the fifth when they ask all these questions. Or they're going to answer and set themselves up for either revealing the truth or for perjury, which they can be later on criminally prosecuted. It's a lose-lose-lose situation. It's in his best interest just to pull that, especially because he's asking for $10 billion. That's a lot of money, and that's why they're not going to settle for this. But also, the $10 billion, consider the fact that BBC is a British news outlet. That little documentary appeared in Great Britain. And, Donald Trump's lawyers try to argue, they did come to Mar-a-Lago, they come to Florida to do some of the reporting. And some Americans through VPN, can access British broadcast television. So because of that, that's why it touches Great Britain. But the allegations in terms of like damage reputation among 50 people. So there's another panel later on in this program where they assembles a panel and kind of called out Donald Trump for the impact of his. Listen to this.
Somehow bringing America as a jurisdiction into the documentary itself. That's their argument anyway.
Is there any evidence whatsoever that is there any data on the traffic on the iPlayer, whatever it was? How do we actually itemize or actually identify that traffic? Because I don't see how they can do it. But the overall point is, would the BBC actually cough up now with your money and my money and Paul's money or will they actually carry on? My opinion is that they simply cannot afford to capitulate at this stage. Don't forget, Donald Trump has got a good track record. He's sued 3 of the major news outlets in the United States, and he's got a huge amount of money from them. However, each one of those news outlets is actually partially dependent upon the goodwill of the presidency and the White House. So I think those particular ones had a real interest in settling. The BBC doesn't have that interest. However, your key point is, if they do go for broke, do you think any single member of the BBC staff will actually be out of pocket? I rather doubt it.
That's a good point. It's kind of like the people who capitulated, they just wanted some favors, and he's wrong when he says that they need the goodwill of the president. No, Donald Trump, the FCC is supposed to be independent. They're not supposed to be going after the outlets. And the outlets to push back, like I said, the news outlets, the news organization to push back, win consistently. So that's a little error on his part. But anyway, so let's get down to the numbers. The Mirror, which is not right-leaning, did an assessment and crunched the numbers in terms of, like, you're saying you damaged reputation amongst people who watched it. Let's listen to this assessment of that.
It accuses the BBC of a brazen attempt to interfere in the 2024 election because about 300 Americans might have seen the Panorama episode with a slightly dodgy edit. His $10 billion lawsuit is predicated on his reputation and political standing having been damaged by showing footage of him saying things he actually said.
You don't concede when there's theft involved.
To an audience that would barely fill a medium-sized pub. It's fewer people than have watched this video. I mean, wait. The docket includes a deposition from Richard Cooper, the BBC's Director of Digital Distribution. He revealed the programme had been watched 570,000 times on iPlayer, but of those, only 285 are from IP addresses that could have been based in America. Not 285,000, 285. And 34 of those were from Florida, where the case is being heard. And somehow it gets even funnier. Cooper said the US-based IP addresses didn't necessarily mean the viewer was actually in the United States. For example, of those 34 streams from Florida, most were traced back to an IP address in Slough via the cruise ship company Carnival, which has its HQ in Florida. That 285 is also over the entire period the documentary was available online, which is about a year. And only a week of that was before the election. In case you're wondering, if you assume all 285 viewers were American voters, which they weren't, the damages Trump is asking for per view comes to $35,087,719.30. In proper money, that's £25,974,385.96 each.
And we did a switch over there, and it was really as per the military, and I just have to do what they...
Even if it were to go to trial, he wouldn't be getting $10 billion. And then also, they're not settling for something like that. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense for settle. Let's wrap up this part. I want to end by showing you a panel from that later on, another segment of this story. They brought on 2 panelists who talked about discovery process and abuse of the legal processes, because that's what they're accusing the BBC of doing. And I think it's interesting because essentially everything they say is what Donald Trump traditionally does. He filed this lawsuit thinking it's going to be a one-way process. He's going to be able to, just force them to do it because they secure the intentions may have to do with, like, embarrassing them, bring them to the table to retaliate or to negotiate, and not have to really wash out all the details. So listen to these guys, what they have to say, because it really is the case.
Now is political strategist Thomas Corbett-Dillon and the chair of Republicans Overseas UK, Greg Swenson. Hello, chaps. Breaking story here today in Washington. Of course, the BBC is literally, Thomas, running around America trying to serve President Trump's kids and Jared Kushner with subpoena papers. And the Secret Service, Thomas, are saying, nah, we ain't taking them. Off you trot.
That's right, and this is not just trying to. They've, on multiple occasions, have now sent people to try and breach Secret Service checkpoints. I mean, imagine this. They are asking a man to hand some papers to the president's daughter. That is a major breach of Secret Service. So all this is doing is just annoying the Trump family, annoying the president. There is now no chance that he is going to wrap this case up. And this idea that there is anything that the family have to say about this has already been through. Joe Biden's Justice Department already went after the president and went through all of the records, looked at all of the text messages from Ivanka, from all of these, from Jared, There's nothing in there. If there was, Merrick Garland would have pushed it. So this is just, it's actually quite bad tactics from the BBC, I think.
Yeah, and I just wonder whose money they're using, by the way, as well, Greg. The BBC has refused to comment on how they're funding this defamation defence against President Trump. They'll say they don't know where the money's coming from, or at least they won't tell the public. I mean, it has to be coming from the licence fee coffers. But, Greg, Trump's children and son-in-law, according to the BBC, have, without question, says the Beeb, knowledge of several incidents on that day, on January the 6th. The BBC lawyers have written, including when Trump sought to convince former Vice President Mike Pence to refuse certifying the result of the 2020 election. Is the BBC just wasting time here? Why don't they just settle this lawsuit?
Yeah, they are. I mean, I think usually when you argue during the discovery phase to get evidence that might embarrass, the defendant or the plaintiff in this case, that might be a way to encourage or stimulate a settlement, an early settlement. And this is doing the complete opposite. This is just going to annoy the president. The nuisance factor is pretty high here. And so I think it will ultimately backfire on any effort to settle this thing quickly and quietly. They should have just rolled over and settled, initially, and instead they're going through this drama. But I think all this is performative, to say the least.
Well, it's a lot to unpack there. First of all, the first panelist guest said that during the Joe Biden administration, they uncovered all the texts, all the information. One, that's not necessarily true. Two, even if they did, that was related to something else. This, for BBC, their specific thing has to do with their case and what they allege in their reporting, separate from whatever the United States are doing. So just because the United States had the inquiry regarding the text message doesn't mean that means BBC has no reason to inquire for that. The second guest said it's nuisance. It's harassment. They're characterizing it, and they're saying they're using this nuisance and hope to find information that's damaging, which, by the way, that means they're admitting that there may be something damaging about the Trump family that they're going to see in there. That's kind of like admission without admission. In hopes of using that to encourage settlement. That is what Donald Trump does. He brings these cases specifically to embarrass, to annoy people, to force them to have to come out with payment. See, the host was talking about where they're getting the money from this. That's part of it, to force people to have to pay, to get a lawyer, to annoy them, to embarrass them. Every accusation is a confession with these people. And then he says, well, why they should just settle. That's another thing. They do that. He does that specifically to get people to settle. Anyway, so BBC is going to defend himself. Donald Trump's going to keep assuming. We'll get into that. We'll see. I'll keep you updated. Now, the separately, that's of the three kids, the Tate brothers, who are notoriously, these guys they're like traffickers. They abuse children. They abuse women. They admitted it on record in front of cameras, and they broadcast it. They broadcast their own crimes to commit and admit to their crimes. They were initially, they left the United States because they were facing charges here. Somehow, some way, they became the comeback. So a representative from Arizona, Yassine Ansari, who is a member of the House of Representative Oversight Committee, asked the chair, who's Jim Comer, to subpoena Barron, because Barron has reporting that he's familiar with the Tate brothers. They've given him dating advice, and somehow, some way, they came here. How did they come here? They came to the United States during Donald Trump's presidency, and that's peculiar. So let's listen to an interview that Yassine had with Brian Tyler Green. Let's see if I can just pull that up.
I have sent a letter to James Comer, who's the chairman of the Oversight Committee, which I serve on, to open an investigation into the broader issue here, into, the communications that Trump White House officials may have had with the Romanian government, into what, Barron Trump has been doing, whether he has been in touch with the Tate brothers, whether he has used his influence with the administration. All of these things, I think, are worthy of being investigated more deeply. And I think Barron Trump should come before the Oversight Committee, as well as Donald Trump Jr., to answer these questions.
So let's look at the letter that she wrote really quickly. So she says that there's been reporting, I cite them before earlier in this video, that have detailed direct, extensive communication between Andrew Tate and Barron Trump, the president's son, as well as the Tate brothers' broader interaction with high-profile political figures within the president's personal circle. The committee must investigate whether back-channel communications between the Tate brothers' presidential advisors and members of the first family, such as Barron Trump, influenced official actions in administration regarding criminal prosecution and investigation of the brothers or international enforcement. Now, and then she goes further in the second page, where she specifically wanted to subpoena DOJ and state records regarding the communications between the Justice Department with Romania and British authorities because they're being extradited to the UK. And then also White House agency logs, because when you're a government, you're a public industry, you have to keep these logs, whether these logs include communications, whether or not there were any like political favors being exchanged. And then Barron Trump politically, because his knowledge of whether Barron Trump knows about the crimes. If you communicated with the members, with his father communications on behalf, because how did they get here? So it might not happen. James Comer most likely is not going to subpoena Barron, but what that tells you, vote, because the minute that the Democrats regain the chairmanship and the House and Senate, so the House Senate Oversight Committee is going to have a Democrat chair, they're going to be subpoenaing Barron Trump. Yeah, so I'll keep you updated to that. That should give you some updates. So yeah, and each one teach one is my motto. Share this video so more people know. Like to support this user, family, community supported channel. So if you like to support the work I do, head over to jjlegal.com. You can purchase a cup of coffee, get a tip, or if you want something in exchange for your support, which is free, is give me your email in exchange and join my newsletter, and you get a Trump Survivor Kit. There's also merchandise there. I have a free civics class, lots of stuff at jjlegal.com. And yeah, so what else do I have over there? Yeah, anyway. So that's it. I'm gonna put here if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm gonna put a playlist of other things that I think you might be interested in if you're interested in this sort of stuff. Share this video. Let's talk below. What do you think about the Supreme Court's decision regarding Agent Carroll? And do you think that is a signal that in the future, Donald Trump's going to be held accountable and the Supreme Court's not going to save him? And then finally, what are your thoughts on Ivanka, Jared Kushner, John Jr. being subpoenaed and having their documents and having them come forward and answer questions and help illuminate the defamation case? Do you think Donald Trump's going to drop the case when it looks like the kids might be subpoenaed? What about the subpoena for Barron Trump? Do you think that's going to happen? If not, what do you think is going to be the retaliation for that? Interesting stuff. Inquiring minds want to know. Let's discuss below. JJ Legal, each one teach one. Again, if you're watching this on YouTube, stay tuned. Keep learning from me.